Hello, friends. I've toned down some of the language in these poems, but if you dislike the implication of sexual things, you've been warned. I'm also going to be reading today because there are some translations of poems and poems of the original. So out of respect for the authors and my memory, I will be reading most of what I say today. But they once asked Ghaznavid Grand Vizier Ḥasan Maymandī, Sulṭān Maḥmūd of Ghazni has several servants world-renowned for their beauty. How has it come to pass that he has not so great an inclination or affection for any of these, such as he does for his general Ayāz, who possesses no great beauty? To this, Ḥasan Maymandī responded, whatever comes close to the heart is good to the eye. هر که سلطان مرید او باشد گر همه بد کند نیکو باشد و آنکه را پادشه بیندازد کسش از خیلخانه ننوازد کسی به دیده این کار اگر نگاه کند نیشان صورت یوسف دهد به ناخوبی و اگر به چشم ارادت نگاه کنی در دیو فرشته نماید به چشم کروبی. Thus, he who has the Sultan's eye ensnared is good however bad his actions are. But any whom the king has turned away will find no friends, not even in the barn. One who looks through denial's eyes cannot but even fair Joseph's sweet face despise. Yet through devotion's eyes a demon looks like how an angel looks through cherub's eyes. This is the first short story in the 5th chapter on love and youth from the Gulistān of Saʿdī Šīrāzī, one of the most famous poets in the Persian language of all time. Saadi's story, written in 1258, is preserved in this really excellent manuscript we have here, completed for the polymath and daughter of the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb, Zēbunnisā, Princess Zēbunnisā, in May or June of 1660. It's impossible for us to know what Zēbunnisā thought when she read this story. Maḥmūd of Ghazni and his lover Ayāz lived in the late 10th and early 11th centuries in what is now Afghanistan. But we can only assume that Zēbunnisā, being royalty herself, saw something of her own loves reflected in theirs. The fact that Saadi should begin his chapter on love with the story of love between two grown men may seem strange to you. Yet this was not at all strange to the Persian literature of the High Middle Ages. Indeed, if you read the story carefully, to Saadi's readers, what's odd about the relationship is not that they're both men, but that General Ayāz was not very attractive. But as we all know, love laughs at locksmiths. For those who are truly in love, all of the pretty servant boys in the world don't amount to much. Now, that isn't to say that there weren't other emperors who weren't above lusting over gorgeous guys they couldn't have. And this is a manuscript of the collected poems of Ḥusayn who was he's a perennial feature in my presentations here. He was the Timurid emperor of the city of Herat, also in northern Afghanistan, at the end of the 15th century and the beginning of the 16th. It was probably this manuscript begun towards the end of his life, or maybe just afterwards, and I predict that we will discover in years to come, maybe through publication, that some elements were actually created after his death in a different context. But in this sort of cliche and slightly pathetic Çağatay Turkic ghazal, we see just how lovesick this sort of old man that Ḥusayn Bayqara is when he's writing this poem can be for a pretty young hypothetical Christian soldier in his army, clad in the color green like Khizr, the enigmatic keeper of mysteries from Islamic legend. Aldı bu mahzun köngülünü bir qadah peyma yigit, qadı ra'na özü zeba husni beham ta yigit. Yok xalayık kim melayik xayledin çıqqay figan. Sekretip at kirse meydan içre ol ra'na yigit. Canı könglim gülşeninin hem gülü hem sarvıdır. Gül kebi yüz berlekiygen xil'at-ı xizra yigit. Canğı yitke İsa-i ruhullah ey aram can. Tapsa bu deyri fenada sin kebi tırsa yigit. Ahli işq içre tapılmaz min kebi şeyda karı. Ahli husn içre ne çükkim sin kebi zeba yigit. Ta xatın çıkmay durur. Kılgıl vefa hattın rakam. Kim bu gülşen gülleri bulmaz tikensize yigit. Deme ol cevr etse özge bir yigit peyda kılay. Ey Ḥusayni bulmaz andak çun yana peyda yigit. A cupbearer lad has entrapped this much aggrieved heart of mine. A lad of body lithe and fine, of unmatched beauty is this lad. Even among the host of angels, no creature can make me sigh so much as when his horse comes bounding on the field, that gorgeous lad. He is both rose and cedar tree within the garden of my heart, his cheeks like roses, clad in robes of green like khizr. Oh, my lad. May Jesus' Holy Spirit hasten to my soul, O peace divine, if it should find within this finite church like you, a Christian lad. Lovesick old men like me are hard to find among the folk of love. How often can one find among the folk of beauty such a lad? Count all the letters in mercy until the day your letter comes. For beware, all the roses in this rose garden have thorns, my lad. Say not that I should find another lad if this one should refuse. O Ḥusaynī, you'll never find another one quite like this lad. So during the period of Western colonialism in the Islamic world, same-sex love seemed to be on everybody's lips, no pun intended. In public, puritanical British observers lambasted the Ottomans for their perceived obsession with pretty boys, all the while denying their own patronage of male sex workers, both in Ottoman Istanbul and back home in Europe. In reality, of course, homosexuality doesn't seem to have been any more common in the Muslim world than in Europe. Open expression of same-sex love, on the other hand, might have been slightly more socially acceptable at times in parts of the Islamic world, but just as in Europe, there was also always a current of anti-gay, and it's an anachronistic term, but anti-same-sex love sentiment. As in the West, arguments against same-sex love in the Middle East were often grounded in religion. After all, Christianity and Islam both share the same Abrahamic roots, and despite what their adherents might want to think, are much more like each other than they are dislike. No poet in the world, I think, pokes fun at religious objections to gay sex quite as well as Abū Nuwās, the 8th or 9th century CE Arab poet from Ayāz in southern Iran, spent most of his life in southern Iraq and Basra, whose works are preserved in this very well calligraphed but not so colorful manuscript, probably from the late 16th or early 17th centuries, my guess. Be warned, Abū Nuwās can be quite graphic. I've chosen a less graphic poem. I have spared you some of the embarrassment by opting to translate the word alutni here as a slightly more Victorian sort of way than Abū Nuwās might have understood it, although it should be noted that etymologically, the word alutni is related to the word for Sodom in the Quran, Lut, right? Ya Sulaymanu khannini wa min ar-rahi fasqini فإذا دارت زجاجة خذها وأعتني ما ترى الصبح قد بدا في إزار متبن أعتني كأس سلوة عن أذان المؤذن اسقني الخمر جهرة وألتني وأزنني. O Solomon, sing me a song and pour some comfort out for me. And if the glass comes round to you, take it and pass it on to me. Look now, the morning light is breaking, clad in golden threads of air. Give me a cup, make me forget the cantor and the call to prayer. Pour me wine out in the open, sodomize and smother me. Well. And our last poem for the day. It doesn't get racier than that, don't worry. The last poem of the day comes from the Ottoman Turkish Dīwān or court poetry tradition. Nevģīzāde Atayi was a 16th century poet from an aristocratic family in Istanbul, where one of the most famous bar streets is named after him. If Nevģīzāde Sokak is named after this guy. The bars actually came later, but whatever. In addition to poems of praise for the Sultan and his companions, who were all friends of his, Atayi wrote a whole epic poem about two bourgeois young lovers from Istanbul, men, who go on an adventure of spiritual self-discovery only to be captured by pirates and rescued by two sophisticated European men, Jean and Yono, with whom they eventually fall madly in love. You can read all about it in this manuscript, which I just discovered is actually from about 1706, 1707, which is only about 20 years after I thought it was. So here we have a poem that makes copious use of somewhat tired tropes, so the same rose, the rose garden, the nightingale, and also one of Islamic literature's most famously attractive male lovers, Khusro, of Khusro and Shirin fame. But it explains heartache in a way that I think we can still relate to today. Teklifi visal eyleme canana cefadur. Zar olma gönül yok yere bu cana cefadur. Ey aşıkı şuride varıp yâre yanaşma.
Hizmet değil ol husrevi hubanı cefadur. Vaiz bilir anlar meyi mahbubsuz olmaz. Ancak garaze zümre-i rindanı cefadur. Gül bezmi savıldı, nece bir eylesin efkan. Dinlenmeyecek bülbülü nalanı cefadur. Derdügam ile sohbeti has eyle atayı. Bigane koma haneye mihmanı cefadur. Propose not that we should part ways, that is a lover's agony. And yearn not for a heart in vain, that is to the soul agony. O unruly lover, go not to another beloved's side. That is not service, it is Khosrow, fairest of men's agony. Ask the preacher, he knows well, they're never without wine or twink, even though his tempers to the pretty boys like agony. The rose's party falls apart, though all its petals sigh as one. A sigh that's never heard, the wailing nightingale's agony. Chat privately with me, Atayi, talk of pain and talk of grief. Don't send me home alone and cold. That is to a guest agony. Happy Valentine's Day.